On the day of my brother Andrew Bennett's wedding, I witnessed something I could never have imagined. My husband and my future sister-in-law sharing a moment of passion hidden in a dark corner. But instead of creating a scandal right there, I decided to join Andrew in turning that day of celebration into a stage of revealed truths, where both of them would end up losing everything within just a few hours. How could a groom betrayed by his own bride remain so calm? Maybe my story will sound impossible to many, but it was the bitter and painful reality I had to live through. That morning the sun shone brightly. Royal Crescent Hotel, a 5-star hotel, was decorated with white silk ribbons and fresh flowers. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting the light across every corner, as if the whole place belonged to a fairy tale. A soft melody and the guests' words of blessing filled the air. It was the big day of my brother Andrew and my future sister-in-law Lauren Pierce. As the groom's sister, Natalie Bennett, I couldn't hide my joy and pride. From a corner of the hotel ballroom, I watched them with a smile, seeing my brother in his impeccable dark suit. His face, lit up with happiness, filled me with emotion. He's 5 years older than me, and ever since we were children he's always protected me. After our parents died too soon, he became my guardian, my friend, my entire world. Seeing him finally find a home and a life partner as beautiful and gentle as Lauren made me truly happy. She looked delicate, spoke softly, and always gazed at Andrew with tenderness. During their courtship she treated me like a real sister. I thought our little family was finally complete, and that I too had found my own refuge. My husband, Richard Coleman, stood beside me, his arm around my waist. He was an architect, talented, and, to my eyes and everyone else's, the perfect man. We had been married for 5 years, with a relationship many envied. He was always kind, attentive, my support through every storm. He squeezed my hand and whispered in my ear, "Your brother looks amazing today, and your sister-in-law seems like a dream. They're a match made in heaven." I smiled, resting my head on his shoulder. "Yes," I replied tenderly, "I hope they'll be as happy as we are." I truly believed I was the luckiest woman alive. I had a loving brother, a wonderful husband, and soon a charming sister-in-law. I lived in a pink bubble, until I burst it with my own hands. The ceremony was about to begin. Suddenly I realized Richard had disappeared for a while. I wanted to take a picture with the couple before they went up to the stage, so I looked around, but his familiar silhouette was nowhere to be seen. I assumed he had gone to take a call, so I walked alone toward the back hallway, where there was a small balcony overlooking the hotel's garden. It was a quiet place and I thought he might be there. As I approached, I heard whispers mixed with a woman's laughter. That voice sounded painfully familiar. My steps slowed and my heart began pounding. Through the narrow gap of a half-open glass door, I saw something that froze my blood. My husband Richard was holding and kissing Lauren, the bride of the day, my future sister-in-law. She still wore her perfect white gown, but now it seemed terribly false. All the noise of the place vanished. I could only hear the sound of my heart shattering into pieces. I leaned against the cold wall to keep from falling. A lump rose in my throat and my whole body trembled. Then their voices reached me. Each word was like a knife cutting through what was left of my hope. "You're so bold, darling, coming here at this hour," said Lauren, her tone flirtatious as she wrapped her arms around Richard's neck. He let out an arrogant laugh, one I had never heard before. "What are you afraid of? No one would suspect a thing. Look at that silly woman's family, too busy acting like puppets. And her brother Andrew is nothing but a naive fool in love. We have everything under control. That silly woman was me. That fool in love was my brother." Rage and helplessness flooded me. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails pierced my skin, yet I didn't even feel the pain. "Even so, I'm scared," Lauren continued in a trembling voice. "What if it all comes out later? Besides, I don't like the idea of living with you and your wife." Richard laughed again, this time with disdain. "Don't be jealous. That woman means nothing. I married her only for appearances, to be the husband of a respectable, educated woman. She's my shield. Once she gives me a son, I'll get rid of her. Then all of Andrew's fortune will be ours, and you can have whatever you want." Hearing those words felt like lightning striking my soul. I couldn't take it anymore. My world, my beliefs, 5 years of love, collapsed completely. I turned and walked aimlessly like a ghost. Tears streamed down my face, but I couldn't scream. I just felt sick to my core. Staggering, my mind blank, I bumped into someone. Through the blur of my tears, I recognized Andrew, the groom. Seeing me like that, he frowned in concern. "Natalie, what's wrong? What happened?" I couldn't hold back anymore. I threw myself into his arms and burst into tears. Between sobs, I told him everything I had seen and heard. I expected him to explode, to rush to the balcony, to destroy everything, to cancel the wedding immediately, but he didn't. He simply listened in silence, gently patting my back. When I finally stopped crying, he carefully moved me aside and looked me in the eyes. There was no shock or anger on his face, only a terrifying calm. He wiped my tears with his fingers and then winked, a gesture only the two of us as siblings understood. "Calm down," he whispered firmly. "The main act is about to begin." His words puzzled me. What did he mean by the main act? If you, dear listeners, are just as curious as I was, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next chapter of this story. And write which city you're watching us from. Andrew's words echoed in my mind like thunder, leaving me too stunned even to cry. How could he speak with such serenity when his fiancée and my husband had betrayed him on his wedding day? My thoughts were chaos. Maybe the shock had driven him insane. Seeing me frozen, Andrew Bennett said nothing more. He took my hand firmly and led me to the end of the corridor where the groom's lounge was located. He looked around carefully, and once he confirmed no one was nearby, he gently pushed me inside and locked the door. The room was decorated with white ribbons and balloons, yet the air felt heavy and suffocating. "Natalie, listen to me carefully," he said in a serious tone, looking straight into my eyes. "I've known all of this for quite some time." I froze. "What? For quite some time? How?" I asked, unable to believe it. Andrew sighed and pulled up a chair for me. "It was 3 months ago," he began, "when I noticed something wasn't right. That woman, Lauren Pierce, started showing an unusual interest in how we managed the Bennett Group. She kept asking about ongoing projects, our financial situation, and tiny administrative details that no bride-to-be should care about. And your husband, Richard Coleman, behaved toward her in a way that wasn't normal. Lingering looks, subtle gestures of complicity, little signals only the two of them would understand. While I had been living blind inside my happiness, my brother Andrew Bennett had already noticed those dangerous undercurrents moving beneath the surface. I had a bad feeling," he continued calmly. "That's why I secretly hired a private detective. And what he found was far worse than I imagined. It wasn't just infidelity, Natalie. Behind it was a cold, calculated conspiracy." Andrew took out his phone, unlocked it, and showed me several photos and documents. In the pictures, Richard and Lauren appeared together on secret dates, entering and leaving luxury restaurants and hotels as if nothing were wrong. There were also bank statements, large transfers of money from an unlisted account into Lauren's account. And what chilled my blood the most was a detailed plan found in Richard's email correspondence. The plan was divided into stages. First, Lauren had to seduce Andrew, win him over with her fake sweetness, marry him, and officially become part of our family. At the same time, Richard, using my trust as his wife, would slowly leak internal business information. The final goal was clear. After the wedding, Lauren would convince Andrew to entrust Richard with several key projects that would allow them to conspire together, divert funds, fabricate fake debts, and eventually push the company our parents left us, the Bennett Group, to bankruptcy, taking everything for themselves. My blood turned to ice. My 5 years of marriage, the love I thought I had built day by day, turned out to be nothing more than a piece on their board. Richard hadn't loved me. He had used me as a pawn, a convenient tool to execute his filthy conspiracy. The emotional wound turned into deep, burning hatred that consumed me from within. They hadn't only trampled on my feelings, they had tried to destroy our parents' lifelong work. "Then why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did you go through with this wedding knowing all of that?" Andrew met my gaze, a hard glint crossing his eyes. "If I had broken the engagement back then," he said, we would have caught only two small fish, Richard and Lauren. The real puppeteer, the one pulling the strings from the shadows, would have never come to light. And we didn't have enough proof to expose the entire network. That's why I decided to turn the wedding into a trap, a stage with an audience, where everyone would witness the full performance. He squeezed my hand. I have everything ready, Natalie. The company's main assets are already protected in a secure trust. The projects they're interested in are fake, worthless ones. I've placed recorders and cameras in key spots. All we have to do is wait for them to expose themselves. I looked at him with a mix of sorrow and admiration. Andrew had carried everything in silence, planning every move, counterattacking without a word, while I lived happily in my pink bubble. Now I need you, he said in the most serious voice I had ever heard. Your discovery today is something they didn't foresee. It's our ace up the sleeve. To Richard and Lauren, you're just a heartbroken wife, he added. They'll never suspect you. So play the part, keep crying, pretend you're broken. The more miserable you seem, the better it'll work, he concluded firmly. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. The pain still burned, but it no longer weakened me. It turned into living fire. Andrew was right. This wasn't the time to fall apart. I wasn't just crying over my husband's betrayal anymore. I was ready to fight for my family's justice. I can do it, I nodded, my voice stronger than before. At that moment there was a knock at the door. Mr. Bennett, said the voice of the wedding planner, it's time to begin the ceremony. Andrew stood, straightened his bow tie with a confident gesture, and gave me a reassuring smile. All right, little sister, he said quietly. Let's go. The show is about to start. Remember, you're not alone. Your brother's here. He opened the door and we walked out together. When we reached the lobby, we saw Richard and Lauren chatting cheerfully with several guests, arm in arm as if nothing had happened. When they noticed us, Richard hurried over, wearing that well-practiced look of concern. Natalie, where were you? I've been looking everywhere. I looked up. My eyes were swollen from crying. I didn't answer. I just shook my head and clung closer to Andrew. Richard seemed confused by my coldness but probably blamed it on exhaustion. The music in the hotel ballroom turned solemn. The master of ceremonies announced loudly, "Let's welcome today's main stars, the groom Mr. Andrew Bennett and the bride Miss Lauren Pierce." The lights focused on them and all eyes filled with admiration. As my brother took that woman's hand, the same woman who was about to become my sister-in-law, to walk into the hall, I smiled. Maybe that smile was the most perfect lie of my life, but it was also the announcement of the storm that was coming. Under the bright lights of the stage, Andrew Bennett and Lauren Pierce looked like the perfect couple. Andrew still wore a happy smile, but I knew it was all part of an impeccable performance. Lauren pretended to be shy and tender, occasionally throwing him loving glances. She truly had the talent of an actress. They walked down an aisle covered in white roses as the applause continued, and hundreds of guests rose from their seats. I sat in the first row of the family section with Richard Coleman by my side. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders and whispered sweet words from time to time. "Aren't they beautiful?" he murmured softly. "I hope one day we celebrate an anniversary just like this." I leaned against his shoulder, pretending to be wrapped up in that romantic atmosphere. In reality, I was forcing myself to hold back the nausea rising in my throat. Every word he spoke disgusted me. His hand on my shoulder, the same hand that once caressed me gently, was the very one that had just held another woman minutes ago. The ceremony followed the usual protocol. The master of ceremonies, with a syrupy voice, spoke about destinies crossing and souls meant for each other. I almost laughed. Destiny? Yes. A destiny woven with conspiracy and cold calculation. After the meaningless speeches, it was time for the exchange of rings. The little flower girl, dressed in perfect white, stepped onto the stage carrying the wedding bands inside a small red velvet box. Andrew and Lauren looked at each other, ready to exchange their symbols of love. Suddenly, a voice rose from the audience, breaking the solemn moment. The entire hall froze. Everyone turned toward the person who had spoken. It was a middle-aged woman. Her elegant outfit contrasted with the expression of fury and pain hardening her face. She was accompanied by an older man, probably her husband. I saw Lauren shiver on stage. For a moment the color drained from her face. Andrew, on the other hand, remained calm, as if he had anticipated this very moment. "Excuse me, who are you? What's going on?" asked the master of ceremonies, trying to maintain control. The woman didn't answer. She walked straight up to the stage and stopped in front of Lauren Pierce. "Lauren, do you recognize me?" she said, her voice shaking with anger and disappointment. Lauren stepped back. Her face was so pale it seemed drained of blood. "Oh, Mrs. Ravenscroft. How are you even here?" she stammered. "And why shouldn't I be here?" replied the woman bitterly. "I came to see how my future daughter-in-law, the one who swore eternal love to my son, is about to marry another man. I came seeking justice for my son." A murmur spread among the guests. "Future daughter-in-law? Son," they whispered. Next to me, Richard Coleman froze, just as shocked as everyone else. "What's happening, Natalie? Who is that woman?" he whispered. I shook my head, pretending to be just as confused. The woman turned to the crowd and raised her voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt this happy day, but there's something you should know. This young lady on stage, Lauren, was engaged to my son." The silence grew heavier. They were in love for 5 years. They got engaged and were only waiting to set the wedding date. But a few months ago she changed her mind and left him for a richer man, leaving my son in despair. When she finished, she pulled a bundle of photographs from her purse and threw them across the stage. The images scattered on the floor. Lauren with another man, hugging and smiling. There were even pictures from their engagement party. A collective murmur filled the hall. Now the looks toward the bride were no longer admiring but curious, doubtful, even reproachful. Lauren stood frozen, her face white as paper. "No, it's not what it looks like. That person and I broke up a long time ago," she stammered nervously. The woman laughed bitterly. "How shameless. You lie without hesitation. Just 3 months ago you asked my son for money to go shopping and to invest. You deceived and used him. How could you betray him like this?" Lauren couldn't answer. She only looked at Andrew Bennett with pleading eyes. But my brother, the groom, the man who should have been furious, crossed his arms and watched her coldly. I sat quietly, observing everything. I knew this was the first act of Andrew's plan. He had contacted Lauren's abandoned ex-fiancée and invited his mother, Mrs. Elizabeth Ravenscroft, to attend. He wanted to rip off Lauren's mask of innocence in front of everyone. When the situation started to spin out of control, Lauren clutched her chest, swayed, and collapsed to the floor, pretending to faint. "Oh my God, the bride fainted!" shouted several guests. Lauren's family, which I knew were only hired actors, rushed onto the stage, pretending to panic and cause chaos. Amid the commotion, Andrew approached slowly. He looked at the unconscious bride without a hint of concern and then smiled slightly. He took the microphone from the stunned master of ceremonies. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said clearly, "I'm sorry you had to witness such an unpleasant scene, but I believe the truth always deserves to be heard." The hall went silent. Lauren, still lying on the floor, cracked one eye open to peek at the crowd's reactions. "You act wonderfully, Miss Pierce," Andrew continued. "But I think it's time to end this farce." His words fell like a bucket of cold water. Lauren quickly shut her eyes again, but it was too late. Everyone had seen her. "And to make this performance even more interesting," Andrew added calmly, "I'd like to invite another special participant, someone closely connected to this story." He turned his gaze toward where Richard and I were sitting. My heart started pounding wildly. I knew perfectly well that our turn had come. The stage lights swung suddenly toward us, flooding us with blinding brightness. Hundreds of curious, confused eyes fixed on us. Richard was pale, completely lost. "Who is your brother calling?" Richard Coleman murmured in a trembling voice. I didn't answer. I looked at him through tearful eyes, feigning innocence and fragility. On stage, Andrew Bennett continued, speaking in a clear, confident tone. "The person I'd like to invite up is none other than my brother-in-law, the architect Richard Coleman. Would you join us and share this joyous moment? He asked, smiling, a smile that hid a deadly trap. The audience began whispering again. No one understood why the groom would call his brother-in-law to the stage at that moment. Richard looked at me, then at the stage. His face turned as pale as wax. Maybe he was starting to suspect something, but faced with a public invitation and everyone's attention, he couldn't refuse. Go on, darling, I whispered softly, pushing him gently. Maybe Andrew wants you to share the secret of a happy marriage. My words were a blow disguised as tenderness. Richard swallowed hard, forced a smile, and shakily walked toward the stage. Every step weighed a ton. When he reached it, Andrew greeted him warmly, placing an arm around his shoulders and turning toward the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, don't you think my brother-in-law is handsome and talented? I'm proud to have him in the family. The guests laughed nervously. Richard could only return a stiff smile. He's not only a brilliant architect, Andrew continued, but also an exemplary husband, a man who deeply loves my sister. The praise unsettled Richard even more. He didn't know whether to thank him or to run. Then Andrew's tone changed, sharp and cold. So perfect, he said, that not only my sister loves him, other women do too, right, my dear bride? Lauren Pierce, still lying on the floor pretending to faint, trembled. Her eyelids fluttered and many noticed. Richard's face turned deathly pale. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead. Brother-in-law, what are you talking about? You're misunderstanding everything, he stammered. Andrew let out a humorless laugh. Misunderstanding, he repeated. Then let me show you what the misunderstanding looks like. He signaled to the technical team. The two massive LED screens that had been showing romantic pictures of the couple suddenly went black, and then lit up again. But this time there were no flowers or candles. It was a video recorded from a hidden angle on the balcony of the Royal Crescent Hotel. What I had seen with my own eyes barely an hour earlier now appeared before hundreds of people. Richard Coleman holding and passionately kissing Lauren Pierce, still dressed in her pristine wedding gown. The sound was crystal clear. Every disgusting word echoed through the hotel ballroom. That stupid woman's too busy playing puppet, Richard's voice sneered. And that Andrew is nothing but a lovesick fool. I married her just to fool the world. She's nothing but a baby-making machine. The entire hall erupted in shouts and gasps. Shame on you. Disgraceful, people yelled. Chaos took over. Insults rained down on the two figures on stage. The scene of betrayal and adultery was so vivid that no one could look away. Lauren could no longer fake it. She jumped to her feet, pale and trembling. Richard could barely stand. He stumbled backward, shouting desperately. No. It's not true. It's edited. It's a setup. But his weak protests drowned beneath the storm of outrage. Trash. A pair of adulterers. Someone screamed from the back. The hall, once a place of celebration, had turned into a courtroom. I could hardly believe it. Shouts and insults erupted from every corner. Lauren's fake family, the hired actors, stood frozen, red-faced with shame, not knowing where to hide. I sat in the front row, motionless, trying to control the trembling in my hands. Tears welled up again, this time not fake ones. They were real, born of the pain of reliving that scene and hearing those poisonous words again before so many people. I covered my face with my hands, trying to hide my despair. My shoulders shook violently. I had to keep the image of a miserable wife, a woman shattered by the cruelest truth. On stage, Andrew Bennett looked at me. A flicker of compassion crossed his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cold determination. He took a few steps toward the master of ceremonies, snatched the microphone, and spoke with such force that the walls seemed to vibrate. "Ladies and gentlemen," he shouted. His voice carried invisible authority, instantly silencing the uproar. "You've all seen it, haven't you?" he continued. "This is the true face of the woman I was about to marry, and of the man I once considered my brother-in-law, part of my family." He turned slowly toward Richard Coleman and Lauren Pierce. His gaze was as sharp as twin blades. "Do you have anything else to say? Or would you rather I show you something even more interesting?" Both stood pale and trembling, speechless. They only shook their heads. They were completely cornered with no way out. But this, Andrew went on, lowering his voice, doesn't end here. This affair is only the tip of a much larger iceberg. The hall fell into dead silence. Guests exchanged bewildered looks, wondering what else the groom could reveal. Then Andrew reached into the pocket of his tuxedo and pulled out a thick stack of documents. He lifted it slowly so that everyone could see. What these two really wanted, he said with chilling calm, wasn't love, it was this. A murmur spread through the hall. What was in those papers? What connection did they have to the person who, according to my brother, had been pulling the strings from the shadows? Every eye was fixed on the documents Andrew Bennett held, waiting for the next blow of truth. The silence grew heavier. Richard and Lauren raised their heads. In their desperate eyes, fear was written plain as day. They probably knew better than anyone what those papers contained. "Before I explain what this is," said Andrew, his voice steady and clear, "let me tell you a little story. The story of a clever old fox who used two skunks to rob a henhouse." He scanned the room, looking at every guest. When his eyes landed on the VIP section, I noticed a middle-aged man with a stocky build and a gray suit suddenly tense up. He coughed and fumbled with his tie. "The fox," Andrew continued, "knew the henhouse was well protected, so he didn't dare act alone. He needed help. He found two skunks, a female and a male. He promised them a life of abundance, food, and comfort. All they had to do was follow his orders and do exactly what he said. The female skunk had to seduce the head rooster, the future owner of the henhouse. The male skunk had to win over the rooster's naive sister so he could enter the family." Hearing those words, I no longer needed to fake my tears. They came on their own. My brother's symbolic story was another knife twisting in my chest. I was that naive hen. "The final goal," he said coldly, "was to gain their trust, open the doors little by little, and break down the fences so the old fox could slip in easily and take over the entire henhouse. Doesn't that sound like the perfect plan?" He looked straight at Richard Coleman and Lauren Pierce. "You two skunks. Does this story sound familiar?" They lowered their heads, unable to respond. Andrew lifted the stack of papers. "What I have here," he went on, "is the detailed plan and the map that the old fox drew for the skunks. A map showing exactly where to break the fence. This is the complete plan to seize the Bennett Group, the company our parents built over a lifetime." He began showing the pages one by one, projecting them onto the big screen. Figures, charts, and corrupt strategies appeared in full detail. The plan wasn't just about diverting funds. It included fabricating scandals, destroying Andrew's reputation, fueling internal divisions, and setting up conditions for a rival company to buy the Bennett Group for next to nothing. And the name of that rival company was written clearly at the top: Aurea Corporation. Everyone began whispering again. Aurea Corporation was no unknown name. It was a rising power that had climbed fast through risky and controversial deals. And the man in the gray suit, the one who had looked uneasy moments ago, was none other than the company's president, Mr. Edward Collins. All eyes turned toward him. Mr. Collins went pale but tried to keep his composure. He stood, straightened his jacket, and tried to leave the hall. "Mr. Collins," Andrew called out, his voice like an invisible rope pulling him back. "Where are you going in such a hurry? The best part is yet to come, you wouldn't want to miss it." Mr. Collins turned, forcing a professional smile. "Mr. Bennett, there must be some misunderstanding. I have nothing to do with your company's internal affairs." "Nothing to do with it?" Andrew repeated, letting out a short, humorless laugh. "Then how do you explain your secret meetings with these two, the money you sent to Miss Lauren Pierce so she could pose as a wealthy woman, and your promise of a director's position to Mr. Richard Coleman once the takeover succeeded?" Each question hit like a hammer. I knew my brother never spoke without proof. At that moment, two plainclothes officers quietly approached Mr. Collins's table. They said nothing, just looked at him with stern faces. The businessman realized every escape was blocked. He sank back into his chair, sweat glistening on his forehead. The empire he had built so carefully was crumbling before his eyes. The old fox had been cornered. From my seat I watched everything. My heart was no longer filled with personal pain but with fury at the cruelty of the business world. For profit, people were capable of crushing love, family ties, and even basic human decency. My husband, Richard Coleman, the man I had once loved madly, was nothing but a pawn on someone else's chessboard. He had sold his soul for an empty promise. He looked at me, and in his eyes there was no pride left, only a deep emptiness and utter despair. He had lost everything: love, honor, and his future. On stage, after exposing the entire conspiracy, Andrew Bennett turned toward me. He walked slowly, silently, and extended his hand. I took it, and together we stepped onto the stage. Andrew took the microphone. His voice was no longer sharp but gentle, filled with compassion. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "the person most wounded by this story isn't me, it's my sister, Natalie Bennett. This woman has endured the betrayal of the man she deeply loved. She is completely innocent." He looked at me with brotherly affection. "Natalie, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you had to go through this. I should have seen it sooner. I should have protected you better." I shook my head, tears welling again, but now they were tears of gratitude and emotion. "Today's wedding," Andrew continued firmly, "won't have a bride. But the celebration will go on. I hope all our distinguished guests will stay and consider this a celebration of truth." The hall erupted in applause. They weren't clapping for a union but for courage, justice, and the triumph of honesty. Just when I thought everything was over, a sharp scream pierced the air. It came from Lauren Pierce. The bride collapsed on the floor. She suddenly jumped up, yanked a sharp hairpin from her hair, and with a wild look in her eyes charged straight at me. "It's all your fault. All your fault," screamed Lauren Pierce, hysterical. The action was so fast that no one had time to react. The hairpin, gleaming under the stage lights, flew toward me like a poisoned arrow. I froze, my mind blank. I saw the danger coming, but my legs wouldn't move. Andrew beside me couldn't react in time either. When the sharp tip was just inches from my face, a shadow darted forward like lightning. It was Richard Coleman. He threw himself in front of me. The hairpin grazed his shoulder, leaving a streak of red on his white shirt. "Ah!" he cried out in pain, stumbling backward. Lauren looked stunned by what she had done and by Richard's reaction. She dropped the hairpin, frozen, her face pale as wax. At that moment, the hotel's security guards rushed to the stage. They grabbed her and led her away amid shouts and chaos. The hall erupted once again. Andrew bent down to help Richard. "Are you all right?" he asked with concern. Richard, grimacing in pain, shook his head. He didn't look at Andrew but directly at me. His expression was strange, a mix of regret, pain, and maybe relief. "Are you all right, Natalie?" he asked weakly. I stared at the bloodstain on his shoulder, a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. Why had he done it? Why would the man who had deceived, used, and betrayed me so cruelly risk his life for me now? Was it genuine, or just another act meant to win my sympathy? "Take him to the infirmary immediately," Andrew ordered the hotel staff. As they carried Richard away, the two plainclothes officers also escorted the president of Aurea Corporation, Mr. Edward Collins. He no longer had that imposing air, just a defeated man, head bowed, surrounded by looks of contempt. The farce of the wedding had come to an end. Andrew took the microphone to calm the guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I apologize for the unfortunate incident. Our celebration ends here. On behalf of the Bennett family, thank you sincerely for being with us." The guests began leaving one by one, whispering among themselves. The grand wedding hall that hours earlier had overflowed with luxury and joy now looked like an empty stage, cold, almost ruined. We were left alone, Andrew and I, in the silence. Exhaustion washed over us. "It's over, Natalie," my brother said, giving my shoulder a gentle pat. I nodded, but a question kept circling in my mind. "Brother, how did you know everything? The acquisition plan, Mr. Collins's role, how did you discover it?" Andrew looked at me and gave a sad smile. "Because I wasn't the only one who wanted to expose him," he said. Then he told me another story, one that had remained hidden for many years. Before our father died, he had been a friend and business partner of Mr. Collins. Together they had laid the foundations of both companies. But that same man, through deceit and manipulation, had stolen our father's shares and driven him into ruin. That blow had made him gravely ill. Not long after, his health deteriorated and he passed away. I always had my doubts about his death, Andrew continued. After I inherited the company, I began investigating in secret. Little by little I found traces of his fraud, but he was clever. He erased every clue. I never had enough proof to bring him down, until Lauren Pierce appeared, my brother said quietly. At first I fell for her sweetness, but there were too many coincidences. She kept mentioning projects where Aurea Corporation was our rival. I had her investigated, he went on, and I discovered her connection to Mr. Collins. I realized he was trying to pull the same trick on me that he did with our father. That's when I decided the time had come to avenge him. Hearing this, a lump formed in my throat. Beneath my brother's strength and success, he had carried the weight of vengeance for years. He had lived surrounded by lies, pretending to love a woman he despised, waiting for the day she'd fall. So it was all part of your plan, I said, my voice trembling. Andrew nodded. Almost all, he replied. Except for one thing, I didn't know your husband was involved. Or that you'd be the spark that made everything explode. He looked at me with pride. My little sister, you've really grown up, he said gently. I smiled through tears. We had won, together. We had prevailed. A few minutes later, a hotel staff member came over to inform us that Richard Coleman had received first aid. The wound wasn't deep, but he needed to go to the hospital for a tetanus shot and a full checkup. He added that Richard wanted to speak to me privately before leaving. I hesitated for a moment but finally nodded. I needed to know whether there was still a shred of sincerity left in him. I walked into the infirmary. Richard was sitting on a cot, his shoulder bandaged. He looked disheveled, his designer suit wrinkled, shirt stained with blood, face pale and exhausted. When he saw me, he lifted his head. His eyes were filled with guilt. I'm sorry, Natalie, he said weakly. What's the point of an apology now? I asked coldly. I don't expect forgiveness, he murmured, lowering his head. I just want you to know when I jumped in front of you, it was real. It wasn't an act. I looked at him in silence. For 5 years, Richard Coleman continued in a hoarse voice, I lived a lie. I got close to you because of Mr. Edward Collins's plan for money. But later, I began to feel something real. Your kindness, your warmth, they moved me. But by then it was too late. I wanted everything. You, the money, the status. Greed blinded me, he said, lifting his head as tears ran down his face. Today, when danger struck, I realized the only thing I truly wanted to protect was you. But it's too late for everything. I listened to his confession without emotion. Love? Perhaps it had once existed, but betrayal had killed whatever was left of it. Save your words for the judge, I replied firmly. Between us, it's over. I turned and walked out, leaving him alone with his remorse and too late tears. The moment the infirmary door closed behind me, the door to my 5 years of marriage closed forever too. A week after that chaotic wedding, things slowly began to settle, though the consequences were enormous. The Aurea Corporation case became a scandal that shook the business world. Mr. Edward Collins, Lauren Pierce, and several executives were arrested for fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage. Despite his act of saving me, Richard Coleman couldn't escape justice. As a key player in the scheme, he was summoned to testify and faced trial. I filed for divorce and the process was quick and undisputed. We decided to sell our house, the only valuable property we shared. I didn't want to keep anything that reminded me of a past full of lies. When everything was finally resolved, I realized I needed time for myself. I decided to travel alone, to go somewhere far away, clear my mind, and start a new life. I chose the Isles of Scilly, the island of calm, a peaceful place to heal my wounds. During my days there, I didn't visit many tourist spots. I simply spent time walking along Cala Serena Beach, sitting in cozy seaside cafes, reading and writing. After so many storms, I finally understood what I truly needed: inner peace. One cool afternoon while I sat in a wooden cafe overlooking the sea, sketching ideas for a new Bennett Group project, a familiar voice spoke beside me. "Hello. Small world, isn't it?" I looked up in surprise. It was the police officer who had handled my car accident that day. His sudden appearance caught me off guard. He was no longer in uniform but wearing a khaki jacket and jeans, looking younger and more relaxed. The sea breeze of the Isles of Scilly gently stirred his thick, dark hair. "Hello," I smiled, trying to hide my surprise. "What a coincidence. Are you here on vacation?" "Something like that," he said with a soft smile and a small dimple. "I was transferred here a few weeks ago. You could say I'm starting a new life." He glanced at my notebook and pen. "Were you working?" "I'm sorry if I interrupted." "No, I just finished," I replied quickly, closing it. He hesitated for a moment. "Would you mind if I sit here for a while? The cafe's packed and this is the only free table." I looked around. The little cafe was indeed full. "Of course, please have a seat." He pulled up a chair and sat across from me, ordering a hot latte. There was a brief, awkward silence. Neither of us seemed to know what to say. At the wedding that day, he finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "I saw everything. You were very brave." His words caught me off guard. I'd thought he was only there to handle the investigation. I hadn't realized he'd noticed anything else. "Thank you," I said softly. "Fortunately, all that's behind me now. I'm Michael Reed," he introduced himself suddenly. "Natalie Bennett," I replied. "Nice to meet you, Michael." We began to talk. At first it was light conversation, about the Isles of Scilly, work and hobbies, but gradually it became deeper. Michael told me why he had transferred. After years working in stressful London, he'd grown weary and wanted a quieter life. He loved mountains, forests, and the clean air of the islands. I shared my story too, not the painful details of betrayal, but my decision to leave the city and my wish to find balance again. We discovered something in common. We were both searching for a new beginning. Michael was an easy man to talk to, intelligent, warm, with calm, steady eyes that belonged to someone who had seen a lot of life. Talking with him made me feel at ease, a feeling I hadn't known in a long time. The sky began to darken and the cafe's soft yellow lights created a cozy glow. "I don't know how long we've been talking." "It's getting late," he said, checking his watch. "I need to get back to the station." "It's been a pleasure talking to you, Natalie." "The pleasure's mine," I smiled. "Oh, this weekend," he hesitated. "I'm planning a hike in the Eastern Hills. If you're not busy, would you like to join me?" His invitation made me blink in surprise. "Hiking? I've never tried that." "All the more reason to," he grinned. "The air up there is incredible. It clears your mind." I thought for a moment and nodded. "I'd love to." After that unexpected meeting, Michael and I had our first outing together. We hiked through the hills, wandered among vast pine forests, and discovered hidden little restaurants tucked into the streets of St. Mary's. With Michael by my side, I was no longer a woman pretending to be strong or distrusting everyone. He gave me a strange, peaceful sense of safety. He didn't ask about my past or force me to reopen old wounds. He simply stayed beside me, sharing life's quiet joys. Our feelings grew naturally and gently, like the morning mist over the Isles of Scilly. One night, as we sat beside the River Piraeus, watching the calm water reflect the moonlight, Michael suddenly took my hand. "Natalie," Michael Reed's voice was deep and warm, "I know you've been through a lot. I don't want to reopen old wounds. I just want to tell you that, if you'll let me, I'd like to write a new chapter with you, one filled with joy and happiness." I looked into his sincere eyes and my heart softened. Tears returned, but this time they were tears of happiness. I said nothing. I just nodded and squeezed his hand tightly. 2 years later. "Mom, hurry up. Dad and Uncle Andrew are waiting outside." The cheerful voice of my little daughter Sophie came from the door. I smiled and fixed the bow in her hair. "Mom's coming, princess." I looked in the mirror and saw the reflection of a woman radiant with happiness. Today was a special day. My first wedding anniversary with Michael, and the day our whole family would travel to London for the grand opening of a new branch of the Bennett Group. My life had changed completely. After that life-changing trip to the Isles of Scilly, I had found true love and real happiness. After some time together, Michael requested a transfer back to London so we could be together. He said that wherever I was, that was where he found his peace. We had a small, intimate beach wedding with our loved ones. My brother Andrew Bennett also found happiness after so many storms. He fell in love with a kind teacher, and they had recently welcomed their first child, a healthy baby boy. The Bennett Group, under Andrew's direction and with my support, had grown strong, becoming a leader in its field. As our car drove down the family highway, Sophie sat on my lap, chatting and pointing excitedly at everything she saw through the window. Michael, at the wheel, glanced back now and then with tenderness. When we passed a large prison, I fell silent. I knew there were people inside paying for their mistakes. I had heard that Richard Coleman would soon receive a sentence reduction for good behavior. I also learned that Lauren Pierce had suffered a mental breakdown and was moved to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. And Mr. Edward Collins was still a free man. I no longer hated them. My heart was at peace. The bitterness was gone, replaced by love and forgiveness. The opening ceremony was a great success. Amid the lively crowd, I received a beautiful bouquet of white roses with no sender's name. Inside was a small card, written in trembling handwriting, clearly from an older person. "Congratulations. I wish you happiness. Forgive me. Perhaps someone somewhere was watching me and truly wishing me well." That night, after the celebration, when Sophie was already fast asleep, Michael and I stood together on the balcony of our Royal Crescent Hotel suite. We watched the bright city lights of London glitter in the distance. Michael wrapped his arms around me from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered softly. "Thank you for coming into my life, for giving meaning to my days." I smiled and turned slowly, resting my head against his chest. "I should be the one thanking you," I murmured. "Thank you for healing the wounds that were still inside me." We embraced in silence, letting the distant hum of the city blend with our breathing. At last I felt peace. Life, I thought, is like a long road full of unexpected turns. There were moments when I believed I had fallen into the abyss of despair, but it was in that deepest darkness that I found the light that saved me. A new beginning, a new happiness. And that happiness was now in my arms. After that trip to London, we returned to our quiet routine. Our little house was once again filled with Sophie's laughter and the warmth of family. My brother Andrew Bennett often visited on weekends with his wife and their son. Watching Sophie and my nephew run together in the garden made me feel that my heart had finally healed completely. The past seemed further away each day, like an old story I only recalled now and then. The bouquet of white roses with no sender and the little card I had received at the Bennett Group branch opening I considered nothing more than a late apology, perhaps from one of Richard's relatives. I didn't dwell on it. I placed the card at the bottom of a drawer and locked it away, as if truly closing that old chapter of my life. But life is never as quiet as it seems. The first signs were so faint that at first I thought it was just my imagination. Sometimes while driving through the city, I had the feeling that a black car was following me from a distance. But when I looked carefully in the rearview mirror, it disappeared among the traffic. Another time, while playing with Sophie in a nearby park, I felt someone's gaze on us. When I turned, I saw a middle-aged woman dressed elegantly, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and large sunglasses that covered half her face. When our eyes met, she quickly turned her head and hurried away. I told Michael, who laughed and hugged me gently. "You're overthinking again," he said, smiling. "You're a successful, beautiful woman now. It's normal for people to notice you." I knew he said it to reassure me, though his instincts as a police officer kept him cautious. "I'll check the security cameras around the house," he added seriously. "It never hurts to be careful." Days passed and I eventually forgot about it. Until Sophie's second birthday. The party was small, just Andrew's family, us and a few close friends. While everyone sang happily, the doorbell rang. Michael went to answer and came back with a neatly wrapped gift box, his expression slightly tense. "It's from a delivery service," he explained. "A present for Sophie, but there's no sender's name." We were all surprised. I took the box, feeling uneasy. It was wrapped in fine paper and tied with a soft pink silk ribbon. Whoever sent it had taken great care. Could it be from one of your business partners? Andrew suggested. Maybe, I replied, trying to smile. It could just be a courtesy gift. I opened the box slowly with everyone watching. Inside, on a bed of soft velvet, was a delicate, elegant white gold bracelet. The pendant was a lotus flower, carved with delicate precision, with a small diamond in the center that sparkled under the light. It was an expensive gift, but what froze my blood wasn't its price, it was the small card that came with it. The handwriting was neat, refined, and, to my horror, familiar. I opened the card with trembling hands. It contained only one sentence. Happy birthday to our little one from her grandmother. The word grandmother struck me like lightning. Who could have written that? My mother had been dead for years. Michael's mother lived in the countryside and her handwriting was nothing like this. And my ex-mother-in-law, Richard's mother, could barely hold a pen. I took the card and compared it to the one that came with the bouquet of white roses. They were identical, the same handwriting, the same person. A woman who called herself Sophie's grandmother. What's wrong, Natalie? You're pale, asked Michael, placing a hand on my shoulder. I couldn't answer. I simply handed him the card. He read it, frowned, and examined the bracelet closely. This is very strange, he said gravely. Who could this person be? How does she know Sophie's birthday, and why send such an expensive gift? I sat down, my mind tangled in confusion. Fragmented images spun in my head. The black car that had followed me, the mysterious woman in the park, the anonymous bouquet, and now this bracelet with a note signed grandmother. None of it could be coincidence. Someone, a woman, was watching my life and my daughter's from the shadows. She knew too much. She was wealthy and she called herself Sophie's grandmother. But how could that be? My mother had died in a terrible accident. I had seen the funeral photos myself and together with Andrew had been at her burial. There was no doubt. Then who was this woman? A distant relative I had never known? Or was it something far darker? A secret from my past? I looked at my little Sophie, still laughing and playing, completely unaware of the storm beginning to gather over us. My chest tightened. I wouldn't let anyone hurt her. I had to uncover the truth. Whoever that woman was and whatever her intentions, I had to find her. The peaceful life I had worked so hard to build was once again facing a storm, one blowing in from a past I thought I had buried. The mysterious birthday gift had completely shattered the joy of the celebration. When everyone left, only we and Andrew's family remained. My brother examined the bracelet with a serious expression. This isn't something simple, he said quietly. A white gold bracelet with a diamond must be worth thousands of dollars. Whoever sent it isn't ordinary. His wife, always practical, added. What if it's someone from your ex-husband's family, Natalie? Maybe they're trying to reach out to the child. I shook my head firmly. Impossible. They have no reason to, and this handwriting isn't theirs. Michael remained silent for a moment before speaking with the calm of a seasoned investigator. The first step is to trace the source of the gift. I'll take the box and wrapping to the Central Forensic Laboratory. Maybe we'll find fingerprints or a clue. And I'll check the security cameras around the house, he added. We might identify the courier's vehicle. Andrew nodded. Good. I'll also ask around the jewelers. The lotus design is very distinctive. It was probably a custom order. The conversation stalled. We had many theories but no solid explanation. That night I couldn't sleep. I held Sophie in my arms, watching her peaceful face. An invisible fear gripped my heart. Who was that woman? What did she want from my daughter? Could she mean harm? The following days passed in constant anxiety. Michael and Andrew investigated everything they could, but every lead vanished. The courier service was small. The sender had paid in cash and used a false name. The security cameras only showed a regular delivery driver. Nothing unusual. No jeweler recognized the bracelet's design. The mysterious woman seemed to have planned everything meticulously, leaving no trace behind. Seeing the investigation reach a dead end made me even more restless. I realized I couldn't just sit and wait. I had to find answers myself. I decided to start with my past, with what I knew about my mother. I requested a few days off work, left Sophie with Michael's mother, and went alone to my parents' old house in the village where Andrew and I grew up. I hadn't been there in years. The house was the same, blanketed in the dust of time, yet every corner stirred warm memories of my mother. I began cleaning the attic where she had kept old objects and family mementos. I hoped to find among those seemingly insignificant things some clue about the mysterious woman, some secret my mother had never shared. I turned the pages of the old photo albums one by one. Black and white photos, faded color ones. My mother beautiful and radiant in her youth. My parents smiling on their wedding day, pictures of Andrew and me as children, laughing in our parents' arms. I looked through them again and again, but there was no sign of any elegant, unfamiliar woman. Just as I was about to give up, my hand brushed against a small wooden box hidden at the bottom of an old chest. The box was locked with a rusty clasp. After struggling for a while, I managed to open it. Inside were no jewels or money, but a bundle of yellowed letters, neatly tied with a purple ribbon. I took the letters in my trembling hands. The handwriting wasn't my mother's or my father's. It was a woman's script, graceful and elegant, identical to that on Sophie's birthday card. My heart stopped. I quickly opened the first letter. Dear Margaret, it has been a year since that fateful day. I still cannot forget how you saved me from that car right before it exploded. I don't know how I will ever repay you for this. I'm sending you a small gift. Please accept it. I know you'll refuse, but don't. Consider it a small gesture for the 2 children you have at home. I must leave now. I can't stay in this place that has taken everything from me. Maybe one day when things calm down we'll meet again. With all my love, Veronica. I read the letter several times, my mind spinning. Margaret, that was undoubtedly my mother. A car accident, a savior. My mother had never told us that story. And Veronica, who was she? Why was she writing to my mother? I quickly opened the next letters. They had been sent from abroad, from France and Switzerland. Veronica wrote to my mother about her new life, her loneliness, and the torment of having to abandon her home. She always asked about Andrew and me and often mentioned sending expensive gifts. Gifts my mother had probably never told us about. The last letter was dated about 5 years ago, and the handwriting was shakier. Dear Margaret, I think my time is running out. This illness has tormented me for too long. My only regret is never coming back to care for my 2 children. I know I don't deserve to. I abandoned them. But please, sister, love them for me. Tell them that wherever I am, their mother will always be watching over them and loving them. I'm sending you this key. It belongs to a safety deposit box at the Helvetic Bank of Geneva. Inside is all the fortune I've earned. Please give it to my children when they are grown. Consider it the last gift of a sinful mother. Goodbye, my sister, my friend, my savior. Veronica. The letter slipped from my hands. My whole body trembled. Children. Mother. The truth, an unbelievable truth, was slowly revealing itself before my eyes. That woman, Veronica, no, it couldn't be. My mother was Mrs. Margaret Hale and she was dead. It had to be a mistake. But this bundle of letters, the key, the familiar handwriting. I sat there, stunned in the dusty attic, my mind in chaos. The past I knew, the identity I believed in, all suddenly felt blurred and strange. A massive family secret buried for over 20 years was about to come to light, and it was directly tied to me. That night I couldn't sleep a single minute. The bundle of Veronica's letters and the little key lay silently on the desk, but my thoughts were a storm. Her mother. 2 children. Those phrases echoed in my head, stabbing deep into my heart. I tried to dismiss the crazy thought that Andrew and I weren't the biological children of the woman we had always called Mom, but everything fit together in a terrifying way. The handwriting, the expensive gifts, and the card signed grandmother for Sophie. The next morning I couldn't wait any longer. I had to find Andrew. He had to know. He was my brother, my only family. He had the right to know the truth about where we came from. I drove straight back to the city and went directly to his office. When he saw my pale face and hollow eyes, he looked at me in alarm. I didn't say a word. I closed the office door silently and placed the bundle of letters and the key on his desk. "Read it," I said hoarsely. Andrew, shocked, picked up the first letter. As he read, his expression shifted, from surprise to disbelief to utter shock. By the time he finished, his hands were trembling. When he finished the last letter, he sank into his chair, staring blankly ahead. "No, no, this can't be," he murmured, shaking his head again and again. "Our mother is Mrs. Hale. Who is this Veronica?" "I thought the same," I said bitterly. "But look at this handwriting, Andrew. It's identical to the one on Sophie's birthday card." I showed him the photo I had taken on my phone. Andrew compared the two handwritings closely. The last trace of doubt in his eyes vanished. He covered his face with his hands and his broad shoulders trembled. For the first time in my life, I saw my strong, steadfast brother look fragile, broken. We sat in silence for a long time, each lost in our own confused thoughts. The past we knew, the mother we loved, everything had suddenly become a question mark. "So, Mom, Mrs. Hale," Andrew's voice cracked. "She wasn't our biological mother. She raised us, loved us, but why did she hide this from us?" "I don't know," I said, shaking my head. "But I think she had her reasons. Veronica said she had to leave, that she couldn't stay. Something terrible must have happened." The phrase car accident flashed in my mind. Veronica said Mrs. Hale saved her. "The secret must be in that accident, Andrew," I said, looking straight into his eyes. "We have to uncover the truth. Not just for us," he nodded firmly, "but for both our mothers. You're right. We need to find out exactly what happened 25 years ago." Our investigation began with the few vague clues from the letters. The car crash, the date, and the name Veronica. Thanks to Andrew's position in business and Michael Reed's contacts in law enforcement, reopening the old case files buried under dust wasn't too difficult. A few days later, we obtained the accident report. It described a terrible crash in the Cumbrian Mountains. A luxury car had lost control and plunged off a cliff, exploding on impact. According to the report, there had been 4 passengers: the president of Aurea Corporation and his wife, plus the driver and his wife. The conclusion was that all 4 had died. That name left Andrew and me speechless. Aurea Corporation had once dominated the jewelry industry in England but had mysteriously collapsed shortly after the president's death. "Wait a minute," Andrew Bennett said. "I remember. Our father worked for Aurea Corporation before founding the Bennett Group. He was their financial director." Another coincidence. Everything seemed to connect. "But the report says all 4 died," I said, confused. "Then who was Veronica, and why did she say Mrs. Hale saved her?" "That's the key," Michael Reed, who was sitting with us, interjected. He pointed to a section of the autopsy report. Of the 4 bodies found, one was so badly burned it was unrecognizable. Based on fragments of bone, they could only confirm it was a woman. Everyone assumed it was the wife of Aurea Corporation's president, Mrs. Veronica Green. That means, I held my breath. "It's very likely that woman wasn't Mrs. Veronica Green at all," concluded Michael. "Mrs. Green survived the crash," Andrew said slowly, "and it's possible that the person who saved her was our mother, Mrs. Margaret Hale. But for some reason she chose to become a dead woman in the eyes of the world, and live another life abroad." "But why?" I asked, still confused. "Why would a woman with status, money, and everything else abandon it all? Even her 2 children? That accident," Andrew reflected aloud. "Was it really an accident, or was it murder?" His question filled the room with silence. If it was murder, who had orchestrated it, and why had Veronica been forced to flee? At that moment, Michael's phone rang. It was an old colleague from London. He stepped outside to answer, then came back with a grave expression. "New information," he said. "I asked them to check the list of senior executives at Aurea Corporation from that period. Guess who was appointed acting president right after the death of the president and his wife?" "Who?" Andrew and I asked simultaneously. "It was him," Michael's voice hardened. "The head of Golden International Holdings, Mr. Edward Collins." That name appeared once again. The old enemy of our family, the man responsible for our father's death. A wave of nausea and fury rose in my throat. "This can't be a coincidence," Andrew said, striking the desk. "Collins, our father, Aurea Corporation, and that car crash, they're all connected." A dark and terrible picture began to form. A conspiracy hidden for 25 years. A crime that had not only claimed lives but also destroyed a family. And now, by chance, we were getting closer to its core. Our search for our origins had suddenly turned into a pursuit of truth. The truth behind a serial murder case. And the most likely suspect was our family's archenemy. The name Mr. Edward Collins was the key, the one that opened a door to the darkest secrets of the past. All the events were now connecting in a horrifying pattern. Collins hadn't only caused our father's death to take control of the Bennett group. It was highly probable that 25 years earlier he had orchestrated that deadly crash to devour Aurea Corporation as well. "If that's true," Andrew muttered through clenched teeth, "then he's not human, he's a monster." "But all this is just speculation for now," said Michael, trying to maintain his professional calm. "We have no concrete evidence to accuse him. The case is too old and most traces have probably been wiped clean." "What about Veronica?" I asked. "If she's alive, she's the key witness. She must know exactly what happened. But why did she run? Why didn't she come forward?" "She was probably terrified," said Andrew. "The enemy was too powerful. She had to think not only of herself but also of her 2 children. Maybe becoming dead was the only way to protect us." A lump formed in my throat. My biological mother's departure hadn't been abandonment. It had been a silent sacrifice. She had given up everything for the safety of her 2 children, living in loneliness and torment in a foreign country. And Mrs. Hale, the woman who raised us, had also shared in that sacrifice. She had lived her whole life carrying that secret in her heart. "What do we do now?" I asked, looking from Michael to Andrew. "We go to Switzerland to find Veronica," we said almost in unison. "It's too dangerous," Michael cautioned. "Edward Collins is a cunning old fox. His network reaches everywhere. If he learns we're investigating, he won't hesitate to silence us, just like he did with your father. And besides, we don't even know if Veronica wants to be found. The last letter was written 5 years ago. No one knows what's happened to her since." "Michael's right," added Andrew. "What we need to do first is find proof here. The key to the safety deposit box is the most important clue. It's likely that the fortune Veronica left behind contains more than just money. It might hold evidence exposing Collins's crimes." "But it's a Swiss bank," I said worriedly. "Their secrecy laws are the strictest in the world. Even with the key, I doubt I could access it myself." "Leave that to me," Andrew said with determination. "I have a lawyer friend who specializes in international law. I'll ask him to find a way. It might take time, but it's not impossible." While Andrew handled the legal path through Switzerland, Michael and I decided to start elsewhere, by tracking down the remaining witnesses who had worked for Aurea Corporation around the time of the crash. 25 years is a long time, but surely some people still remembered what had happened. People who had been forced to stay silent out of fear, bribery, or Collins's threats. Our search was grueling. Many had moved away, many had passed on. The few who remained grew pale when they heard the names Aurea Corporation and Mr. Edward Collins, shaking their heads and refusing to speak. The power and cruelty of that man had cast a shadow over them for decades. After several exhausting days, we finally had a breakthrough. We found Mr. Daniel Brooks, the retired chauffeur of Aurea Corporation's late president. He was now a frail old man living alone in a small cottage on the outskirts of town. When we arrived, he was sitting on his porch, staring into the distance with sad eyes. At first he refused to talk. But when I showed him Veronica's photograph and told him who I was, his weary eyes filled with tears. Are you Miss Natalie?" asked the old man in a trembling voice. When I nodded, Mr. Daniel Brooks broke into tears. "By God, you're alive. I thought the entire family of the president had died." He invited us inside. After calming down, he began to tell us the story from 25 years ago, a story he had carried in his heart like a nightmare. "The day of the accident," said Mr. Brooks, his voice shaking, "I was supposed to be the one driving that car. But that morning, the vice president, Mr. Edward Collins, suddenly sent me to another city on an errand. He said it was urgent and sent another driver in my place. The boy was new, had barely started working. I didn't know him well. When I heard about the accident, I knew something wasn't right. That car belonged to the president. I checked it every single day. There was no way the brakes could have failed. I tried to tell the police, but no one believed me. They said I was rambling because of grief. A few days later, Mr. Collins sent someone to deliver a large sum of money, and to warn me that if I kept talking, my family wouldn't be safe. For fear, for my children. Mr. Brooks lowered his head, his voice thick with guilt. I had no choice but to stay silent. I took the money and left the job. For 25 years, I haven't slept peacefully a single night. The guilt has eaten away at me every day. His testimony was living proof that the crash hadn't been an accident, but a carefully orchestrated conspiracy. Mr. Collins, he added, wasn't just ruthless, he was paranoid. He had a small recorder installed in the president's office to monitor every conversation. I once saw him secretly changing the batteries, the old man said. A flash of realization shot through my mind. A recorder. If it still existed, it could contain vital evidence, recordings that could expose Mr. Collins's crimes. But where was that office now? Aurea Corporation no longer existed. Its old headquarters must belong to another company. When we felt lost, Mr. Brooks shared another piece of valuable information. After the president's death, Mr. Collins sealed off his entire office. He said it was to preserve memories, but I know he was afraid. Afraid that someone would find something inside. That room has remained untouched, the top floor of the old Aurea building. All the clues seem to converge on that one place. A room sealed for 25 years, possibly holding the black box of the entire case. But how could we get inside a place so heavily guarded by another corporation? The old building was now called Golden Tower International, rising in the city center like a fortress. Breaking in, especially into a sealed top-floor office, was nearly impossible for ordinary people like us. There's no way to do this legally, said Michael Reed after circling the building. The security system here is top of the line. There are cameras everywhere and guards patrolling 24 hours a day. Each floor's access requires magnetic key cards. Walking through the main door is out of the question. As we racked our brains for options, we finally received a call from Andrew Bennett, who had been silent for several days. I spoke with my lawyer friend, he said. He confirmed that, as her biological children, we have full rights to request information about our mother's safety deposit box at the Helvetic Bank of Geneva. But the process is complex and will take at least a few months. Still, he found something interesting. 5 years ago, right when Veronica sent her last letter, someone tried to access that box but failed due to missing identification. Who was it? I asked anxiously. It was Collins's men. A chill ran down my spine. He knew about the deposit box too. He had been searching for it for years. That confirmed what we feared. There was something inside that could destroy him. And it meant we were running out of time. If Mr. Collins discovered our investigation, he would strike first. The urgency forced us to make a bold decision. If we can't enter through the front door, I said, looking at Michael and Andrew, we'll find another way. Golden Tower International and our Bennett Tower stand side by side. Their rooftops are nearly the same height. You can't be serious, Andrew stared at me in disbelief. No, Natalie, that's too dangerous. It's the only way, I said firmly. We're out of time. You can disable the security systems at Bennett Tower. Michael has the equipment and experience from his police work. And I have to be the one to go in. That room is tied to my past. After a long argument, they reluctantly agreed. The plan was drawn up with extreme care. The time of action, 2 o'clock in the morning, when both buildings would be quietest. That night, the city slept under a blanket of dim streetlights. Standing on Bennett Tower's rooftop beside Michael, my heart pounded like a drum. The cold wind whipped through my hair. From here, the roof of Golden Tower International seemed only about 16 feet away. A small gap, yet one between life and death. Michael prepared the equipment with expert precision. Using a special launcher, he shot a high-tension steel cable across to the railing of the opposite rooftop. It locked securely at both ends. "I'll go first," he said in a calm, steady voice. "Once I'm across and the area's clear, you'll follow. Don't be afraid, I'll hold you steady." I nodded, my palms already slick with sweat. I held my breath as Michael swung onto the line and crossed the dark void with astonishing agility. Minutes later, he reached the other side safely and signaled me. It was my turn. I took a deep breath and gripped the cold cable tightly. My entire body hung suspended in the night sky. Below, the city lights shimmered faintly. One slip and I would plunge into the abyss. But the thought of my mother and the truth waiting beyond gave me strength. When my feet touched the railing of Golden Tower International, Michael rushed to steady me. "You did it," he whispered proudly. We quickly disabled the rooftop cameras and found the emergency stairway down. The sealed office was just one floor below. The old lock wasn't a problem for Michael. The heavy door creaked open, revealing a room that had been swallowed by darkness and dust for 25 years. We switched on a small flashlight and its dim beam swept across the space. Everything was exactly as Mr. Daniel Brooks had described. The desk, the bookshelf, the sofa set, all buried under a thick layer of dust. The stale air smelled of time itself. According to Mr. Brooks, the recorder was hidden behind a large oil painting on the wall. Michael carefully removed it and there it was. An old cassette recorder cleverly fitted into a small cavity. "Do you think it still works?" I asked anxiously. "Hard to say," Michael replied. "But we're taking it anyway." While he dismantled the device, I began searching for more. I had a gut feeling that there was something else hidden in that room. The beam of my flashlight swept across the bookshelf, hundreds of old leather-bound books, most about management and law. Suddenly I remembered one of my father's habits. As a financial director, he always carried a small notebook where he wrote down the most important things, the secrets he didn't want anyone else to know. Would the president of Aurea Corporation have done the same? I began pulling out books one by one, flipping through their pages quickly. Then I grabbed a thick volume titled Justice and Truth. It felt oddly heavy. When I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. The inside had been hollowed out, leaving space for a small black leather notebook. I picked it up with trembling hands. "This is it. It has to be this." Just then we heard footsteps and faint voices coming from the hallway. "Check the rooftop area again." I thought I saw a shadow. My heart dropped. We'd been discovered. The building's security guards were making their rounds. The way back was blocked. We were trapped inside the secret office. The footsteps grew closer. The glow of flashlights slipped through the crack under the door, casting ghostly shadows on the dusty walls. A chill ran down my spine. If they caught us here with this evidence, everything would be ruined. We'd be accused of trespassing and the notebook and recorder would never see the light of day. Michael gestured for me to stay silent. He quickly turned off the flashlight and pulled me behind a huge filing cabinet. We held our breath, trying not to make a sound. I heard the metallic clink of a key in the lock. My heart nearly exploded. They were coming in. "This room's been sealed for decades." "Who would come in here?" said one voice. "Better safe than sorry," another replied. "The boss told us to keep a close eye on this area lately." The boss. It had to be someone working for Mr. Edward Collins. Even after all these years, he was still having this place watched. That only confirmed he knew exactly what was hidden here. The lock clicked and the door creaked open. A blinding beam of light swept across the room. We barely breathed, pressed against the cold metal of the cabinet. Luckily it was large and we were tucked deep behind it. "See? Nothing here. Just dust and cobwebs," the first voice said again. "Come on, let's check the other rooms." They lingered for a few more seconds at the doorway. The light passed over the room once more. Then the door slammed shut. We heard the lock turn again and the footsteps faded down the hall. We were safe. For now. I exhaled shakily, my strength nearly gone. Michael motioned for me to wait. About 10 minutes later, when we were certain the guards had moved away, he switched the flashlight back on. "We need to get out of here now," he whispered. "The way we came in isn't safe anymore." "But how?" The main door's locked and there are guards in the hallway. We were completely trapped. Michael's gaze swept the room and stopped at a small ventilation window near the ceiling. That's our only way out. The window was tiny and high, barely big enough for one person to squeeze through. Outside there was only a narrow ledge, maybe 6 inches wide, running along the wall. It's too dangerous. I shook my head. It's our only option, he said firmly. Do you trust me? In that desperate moment, his calm determination was the only thing holding me together. I nodded. Michael pushed the old desk against the wall, stacked a chair on top and climbed up. He unlatched the small window carefully. A blast of cold night air rushed in. That ledge leads to an emergency balcony at the end of the corridor, he explained. It's about 30 feet away. I'll go first, then come back for you. Just stay close to the wall and move slowly. He slipped out through the window and stepped carefully onto the ledge. My heart lurched as I watched him. A strong gust of wind could have sent him plummeting, but Michael moved with the steady precision of a professional. His steps were firm, his back pressed against the wall. A few minutes later he reached the emergency balcony and signaled to me. It was my turn. The notebook and recorder were secured in my crossbody bag. I took a deep breath, trying not to look down. My legs trembled as I set my foot on the ledge. My whole body clung to the cold wall. The wind howled in my ears, carrying the hum of the city below. Don't look down. Just look at me, Michael's deep, steady voice echoed from ahead. One step at a time. I focused on his silhouette, blocking out the dizzying drop beneath me. 30 feet had never felt so long. When my hand finally reached his, I felt like I'd come back to life. We descended several floors through the emergency stairwell and finally found our way back to the main corridor. Fortunately, the security patrol was sweeping another area. We hurried up to the rooftop and crossed the cable back to Bennett Tower. When my feet touched solid ground again, I collapsed, gasping for air. The suffocating escape was finally over. Back in the safety of my apartment, we didn't rest. We immediately began examining what we had brought back. Andrew Bennett arrived shortly after and listened to our story with a worried expression. Michael Reed carefully opened the old recorder. After fiddling with it for a while, he managed to get it working. We held our breath. The worn cassette tape began to spin, filling the silence with the static of time. Then we heard a familiar voice. The voice of the president of Aurea Corporation, my biological father. He was speaking on the phone. I don't agree, Vice President Collins. That project is too risky. The cash flow isn't transparent. I can't approve it. There was a brief pause, then his tone grew sharper. I've told you already, don't try to fool me. I know what you've been doing behind my back. If you don't stop, I'll expose everything. The call ended and my heart pounded. That was undeniable proof of the conflict between my father and Mr. Edward Collins. But the next recording left us speechless. This time it was Collins's voice speaking to someone else. The old man knows everything. We can't let him live. Make it look like a car accident. Yes, it has to look accidental. His family, deal with them all. Leave no one alive. Then Aurea Corporation will be ours. A confession recorded 25 years ago. Irrefutable evidence. At the same time, I opened the black leather notebook. Inside were not only records of Aurea Corporation's financial transactions but also short diary entries written by my father. He wrote about his growing concern after uncovering Collins's conspiracy, his fear of being watched, and his boundless love for his wife and his 2 small children. On the last page was a line hastily written in special ink, visible only under ultraviolet light, a cautious habit common among finance professionals. Andrew and I knew what to do. We turned off the lights while Michael shone his small UV flashlight over the page. Slowly, the hidden message appeared. All original evidence, contracts, bank statements, is stored in the safety deposit box at the Helvetic Bank of Geneva, box number XYZ. I have entrusted the key to Margaret. If anything happens to me, trust her. She'll know what to do. Everything became clear. Mrs. Margaret Hale had not only raised us, she had been the person our father trusted most, the guardian of the most crucial evidence and of our future. The love and sacrifice of our 2 mothers were beyond measure. Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they were tears of pride and gratitude. Now we held in our hands the confession of the past, the trail leading to decisive proof in Switzerland, and the evidence of Mr. Collins's current crimes. The plan for the final counterattack, the decisive battle, was about to begin. The net was set. All that remained was for the biggest fish to swim into it. With irrefutable evidence in our possession, we knew that Judgment Day was near. But we also understood that facing a cunning old fox like Collins required patience. One mistake and he could turn everything around and erase all traces. "We need an absolutely flawless plan," said Andrew firmly. "We have to strike suddenly without giving him time to react." The three of us prepared it together. Andrew Bennett, with his position in the business world, would deliver the decisive blow in the corporate arena. Michael Reed, with the support of his trusted colleagues, would handle the legal side to ensure there was no escape. And I would face him directly, becoming the spark to ignite the explosion that was coming. The first step was Switzerland. With the recording and notebook as evidence, and with the cooperation of British police, Andrew's lawyer friend quickly persuaded the Helvetic Bank of Geneva. They agreed to open the safety deposit box, provided that I was present, and the process was supervised by both parties. A week later, Andrew and I were in Zurich, Switzerland. The bank vault was cold and silent. When the familiar metal box was placed on the table, my heart began to race again. The key from Mrs. Margaret Hale fit perfectly, and with a sharp click the door opened. Inside were no jewels or cash, only a thick stack of documents wrapped carefully in plastic. They were the original fraudulent contracts, the bank records tracing illicit transfers, and every secret agreement Mr. Collins had used to seize Aurea Corporation. Each document bore his handwritten signature. This was the ultimate weapon, the blade that could end that monster's empire. In the lawyer's presence, we made certified copies of all the material and sent them immediately to Michael. Everything was ready. When we returned to London, tension filled the air. Mr. Collins, after the failed intrusion at Golden Tower International, seemed to sense danger. He doubled his security and tightly controlled all his meetings. "He's trying to cover his tracks and move his assets," Michael reported at an emergency meeting. "We need to act before it's too late." The day of reckoning was set. It was the day of Golden International Holdings' annual shareholders meeting, a grand event that brought together the board of directors, major investors, and the media. It would be the perfect stage to end this story once and for all. That morning I chose a deep red dress, a color that symbolized strength and determination. Andrew wore his usual elegant suit, but in his eyes burned a fiercer resolve than ever. We attended not as rivals but as guests of honor, a surprise move that Andrew had arranged in advance with the help of several shareholders sympathetic to the Bennett Group. The main hall of the National Convention Center was packed. Mr. Edward Collins sat proudly at the center of the stage, still projecting confidence and authority. He delivered a passionate speech about Golden International Holdings' achievements and its ambitious future plans, the kind of perfect speech that only a charismatic leader could give. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Andrew leaned toward me and whispered, "Now." Suddenly, a voice rang out from the entrance. "Excuse the interruption." It was Michael, entering in uniform with a team of investigators. "Mr. Edward Collins, president of Golden International Holdings, we are here to execute an arrest and emergency search warrant on charges of organized murder and misappropriation of corporate assets." The hall froze. Cameras immediately turned toward the stage. Collins jumped to his feet, his face shifting from composure to panic, though he tried to mask it. "This must be a mistake. I'm a legitimate businessman," he barked. "There's no mistake, Mr. Collins," I said, stepping forward from the audience. "Or would you like me to remind you of the car accident that took place in the Cumbrian Mountains 25 years ago?" At that, his mask shattered. He glared at me, eyes filled with hatred and disbelief. Andrew also stood and climbed onto the stage, holding a thick folder in his hand. "And for what you did to our father," he said firmly. "It's time you paid for every one of your crimes." Andrew signaled the tech team. Instantly, the giant screen behind Collins, which had been showing growth charts, flickered, and then displayed scanned documents, contracts, and bank records. At the same time, the hall filled with the sound of Collins's own voice, recorded 25 years earlier, ordering the murder of the entire family of Aurea Corporation's president. "Turn it off. Turn it off now." Collins screamed like a wounded animal, lunging toward the control panel. But it was too late. Everything was already public, broadcast before hundreds of people and live on national television. Michael and his team rushed forward and cuffed him. "Edward Collins, you're under arrest. The empire of Golden International Holdings, built on the blood and tears of others, crumbled in an instant." Standing on that stage, I watched as they took away the enemy of two families. I didn't feel joy, only a quiet, strange relief. Justice had finally been done. "Mom, Dad, do you see it? We did it." In the middle of the chaos, a woman ran out from the crowd and collapsed at my feet, sobbing uncontrollably. It was Mrs. Teresa Collins, his wife. "Miss Natalie, please. Forgive my husband. He just had too much ambition," I whispered, looking at the poor woman weeping before me. Then I turned toward the window. The sky was still blue, the sun still warm. Life would go on. But there are mistakes that can never be forgiven. The fall of Golden International Holdings sent shockwaves not only through the business world but through the entire country. Crimes buried for 25 years had finally come to light. The media dissected Mr. Collins's cruelty and cunning day after day. He went from being a celebrated entrepreneur, a symbol of success, to the embodiment of evil itself. With irrefutable evidence, Collins was sentenced to the maximum penalty for his crimes. His accomplices, the subordinates who had aided him for years, were also brought to justice and received the punishment they deserved. After the trial, our lives slowly began to return to normal. The Bennett Group, freed from an unfair competitor, flourished, not just financially but also in its reputation for integrity and ethics. Andrew, having avenged our father, seemed to have shed a lifelong burden. He was more cheerful now, more human, and spent more time with his young family. As for Aurea Corporation as its only legitimate heirs, Andrew and I decided not to keep it. It was too stained with blood and pain. We sold off all the company's assets, dedicating a portion to compensate victims and their families, those who had suffered under Collins's corruption. The rest we used to create a charitable foundation, the Greenhale Foundation, devoted to helping orphans and women in difficult situations. It was the best way to honor and thank our two remarkable mothers. A year after the case was finally closed, I received a letter. Not an email but a handwritten note sent from an address in France. The handwriting was weak and trembling, but I recognized it instantly. It was my mother, Veronica's handwriting. "My dear children Andrew and Natalie, when you read this, your mother will already be far away. From the explosion at the wedding to the final trial, I saw everything. You were brave and strong. I'm so proud of you. I know you may never forgive the mother who abandoned you for decades, but I truly had no other choice. Faking my death was the only way to protect you from that monster's claws. I've lived all these years tormented by guilt and longing, but knowing that you both grew up safe under my sister Margaret's love made every sacrifice worth it. Now that evil has finally paid for its crimes, the burden in my heart can at last be released. I can go in peace and reunite with your father. Be happy, my children. Live full, meaningful lives. In the name of your mother and father. With all my love. Mom, Veronica." Along with the letter was her death certificate. Veronica Green had passed away only a few days after Mr. Collins's trial. Andrew and I held each other and cried, tears of grief but also of understanding and peace. For the first time we could call her Mom with calm hearts. After so many storms, my life had finally found a safe harbor. Michael and I decided to celebrate a small, warm wedding in the Balearic Islands, the place where our love had begun. On the wedding day, instead of an extravagant white gown, I chose a soft pink silk suit, elegant, simple, and pure. In my hand, instead of a bouquet, I held tightly to Michael's hand, the man who had stood by me through every hardship. Andrew smiled at me with genuine joy in his eyes. Sophie, wearing a lovely little princess dress, scattered rose petals along the path we walked. Amid that warm, intimate atmosphere, there was one very special guest, Mr. Brooks, the former chauffeur. He brought us a small gift, an old photograph of my biological parents in a wooden frame. Miss Natalie, I wish you all the happiness in the world, he said, his voice trembling. I accepted the gift, my heart full of emotion. The past was over, but the good memories and true feelings would live on forever. That evening, as the sun set over Pine Hill, Michael and I stood side by side, gazing at the distant horizon. A new chapter, a new life filled with love and hope, lay before us. I knew that from then on, no storm could ever break me again, because beside me would always be people who loved me unconditionally. And I believe that somewhere above, all three of my parents were watching over us, smiling, blessing our happiness,